3:42 p.m. local time, Southern Caribbean Sea. From the outside, it looked like another routine transit. The water was calm, almost glassy, stretching uninterrupted to the horizon. The sky was clear, visibility near perfect. Conditions sailors quietly appreciate because calm seas usually mean calm days. At the center of it all moved a familiar silhouette, USS George Washington, cutting a steady wake through international waters. Nearly 100,000 tons of steel, aircraft, fuel, and people, moving with the quiet confidence of a ship designed to operate anywhere on Earth. On the flight deck, operations were normal. Aircraft were secured. Maintenance crews moved with unhurried precision. Below deck, the ship's internal rhythm continued as it always did. Watch rotations, system checks, routine reports. Nothing suggested that this afternoon would be any different from dozens before it. But deep inside the ship, in a darkened space where windows don't exist and screens never sleep, the situation was already changing. Inside the Combat Information Center, radar operators watched the familiar sweep of the spy radar paint the sea in clean arcs of data. Merchant traffic appeared where it was expected. Distant contacts moved along predictable shipping lanes. Everything made sense until it didn't. A new surface contact appeared, then another, then several more. The operator leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing, not alarmed, but attentive. New surface contacts, he said evenly. On the large tactical display, 8 returns solidified almost simultaneously, not scattered, not drifting. They were grouped, moving on parallel headings, closing from multiple bearings. What caught attention wasn't just the number. It was what was missing. No AIS signals, no commercial identification, no response to standard maritime hails. These were not fishing vessels. They weren't merchant ships, and they weren't behaving like a routine patrol. The contacts were still outside any immediate danger zone, well beyond weapons range. But geometry matters at sea, and geometry was beginning to look deliberate. The officer of the watch studied the plot in silence. Distances were called out, bearings updated, speeds logged. Each contact held a steady pace, neither rushing nor hesitating, as if following a script already written. 8 Venezuelan warships. The carrier strike group was not surprised by their presence. Encounters like this had become more common in recent years, but this formation was different. Instead of trailing at a respectful distance or shadowing from a single direction, the ships were spreading laterally, slowly shaping an arc ahead of the carrier's projected path. Not interception, positioning. The carrier did not change course. No alarm sounded. No dramatic orders were given. On the bridge, the captain stood quietly, listening as information flowed in. The rules of engagement were clear. The ship was operating legally in international waters. There was no reason yet to escalate. Still, everything was logged. Every bearing change, every speed adjustment, every minute of silence from the opposing ships. In the CIC, one of the analysts spoke softly, almost to himself. They're not transiting. Another update came in. The spacing between the Venezuelan ships was tightening. 2 contacts adjusted speed to align with the others. The arc was becoming cleaner, more symmetrical. That's when the realization settled in. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't posturing for a photograph. This was a coordinated move. The carrier strike group maintained its posture, calm, professional, deliberate. Sensors continued to collect. Cameras tracked hull numbers and deck activity. Nothing was rushed because rushing is how mistakes happen. Outside, the sea remained calm. Sunlight reflected off steel and water alike, giving no hint of the tension building beneath the surface. 8 warships ahead, 1 aircraft carrier holding course. And somewhere between them, the line between routine presence and calculated confrontation was quietly disappearing. By 3:56 p.m., the pattern was no longer ambiguous. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tactical display told a clear story. The 8 Venezuelan warships were no longer approaching on parallel tracks. 2 adjusted course to the north, 3 east south. The remaining ships held center, maintaining speed while the others repositioned around them. What emerged was not a line. It was an arc. Distances were called out in steady cadence. Bearings updated every few seconds. The closest contacts were still miles away, but proximity at sea isn't measured only in distance. It's measured in intent. The ships weren't charging. They weren't retreating. They were shaping space. This kind of maneuver doesn't happen by accident. It requires coordination, planning, and a shared objective. Each Venezuelan ship adjusted speed by fractions of a knot, maintaining relative spacing while slowly compressing the geometry ahead of the carrier's projected track. From the bridge, the captain listened without interruption. No course change was ordered, no increase in speed. The carrier maintained its heading, cutting forward with the same steady wake it had held since the morning. That decision mattered. Altering course would have signaled acknowledgement of pressure. Maintaining course signaled something else entirely. Professional restraint. In the CIC, analysts overlaid projected vectors. If the Venezuelan ships continued on their current headings, the formation would place multiple hulls forward of the carrier's bow within the hour, while outside collision risk, but close enough to complicate navigation and create a visual statement. This was not an attempt to block physically. It was an attempt to dominate the narrative. Gray zone operations rely on ambiguity. No weapons fired, no red lines crossed, just enough pressure to provoke reaction, record footage, and later claim moral or political ground. The Venezuelan ships still had not responded to Hiley's. That silence was intentional. One contact briefly increased speed, then settled back into formation. Another altered heading by 3 degrees, tightening the arc. Through high-powered optics, deck crews could be seen topside. Helmets on personnel near forward mounts. Weapons remained covered but visible. Every detail was recorded. Long-range cameras tracked hull numbers. Radar logged emissions. Electronic support measures listened quietly for changes in signal behavior. The ship was not speaking loudly, but it was listening to everything. At 4:03 p.m., one Venezuelan vessel activated surface search radar at higher power. The signal appeared instantly on U.S. displays. Not fire control, but close enough to be noticed. The officer of the deck acknowledged the update with a nod. No reaction beyond documentation. This was still below the threshold for escalation, and everyone in the room knew it. The danger in moments like these is not aggression. It's misinterpretation. A minor course correction taken the wrong way. A radio call misheard. A maneuver read as a challenge instead of caution. The margin for error narrows, quietly minute by minute. And yet the carrier strike group remained composed. Behind the scenes, systems began to shift subtly, deliberately. Air surveillance assets adjusted orbits. Escort ships fine-tuned positions, not moving forward aggressively, but opening lateral space, not forming a wall, forming a framework. To an outside observer, nothing dramatic was happening. 8 ships on the horizon. One carrier continuing its transit. Calm seas, clear skies. But inside the command spaces, everyone understood the stakes. This wasn't about firepower. Not yet. It was about control of time, space, and perception. The Venezuelan formation held steady, the arc now unmistakable. Cameras captured the symmetry. Analysts noted the precision. This was not a spontaneous encounter. It was a message delivered slowly, carefully, and on purpose. The carrier did not respond in kind. No visible challenge, no maneuver to meet the formation, no acknowledgement beyond presence. And in that restraint, another message was being sent, one far harder to counter. At sea, the most powerful signal is often the one that doesn't move at all. As the distance continued to close, one fact became unavoidable. Whatever Venezuela intended next, the moment for ambiguity was ending, and the next phase of this encounter was already underway. By 4:11 p.m., the encounter had entered a different phase. The Venezuelan ships held their arc, maintaining disciplined spacing. Their movement was controlled, deliberate, and unmistakably coordinated. But while their formation appeared steady on the surface, the environment around them was quietly changing. Not visibly, not dramatically, but decisively. Inside the carrier strike group, posture shifted without a single audible cue. No alarms, no raised voices, just a series of actions that unfolded exactly as designed. Above the carrier, airspace that had seemed empty minutes earlier was no longer neutral. High above the cloud layer, Airborne sensors expanded their watch, extending the strike group's awareness far beyond the horizon. The sea below didn't change, but the way it was being seen did. In the Combat Information Center, the tactical picture grew sharper by the second. Surface contacts were now paired with layered tracking. Bearings were cross-keyed against aerial feeds. Speeds were recalculated with new precision. What had once been 8 ships on a screen became 8 moving data profiles, each with behavior, history, and probability. This is where the difference lies. A ship sees what's in front of it. A system sees everything at once. Escort vessels adjusted position subtly, widening their lateral spacing rather than compressing forward. From a distance, it looked like nothing at all, but from inside the strike group, it created invisible corridors of control, zones where movement was tracked, measured, and anticipated. No one rushed. Time favored the side that stayed calm. At 4:17 p.m., a helicopter lifted from the deck. Not aggressively, not at high speed, but smoothly, almost casually. It climbed to a low observation altitude, maintaining distance while extending eyes and sensors forward. Its presence was not confrontational. It was clarifying. Electro-optical systems went active. Infrared feeds streamed back in real time. The Venezuelan ships were no longer silhouettes on the horizon. Deck layouts became clear. Personnel movements were logged. Even subtle changes, crew clustering near rails, brief gestures, shifts in posture were captured and archived. Still no weapons were manned. Still no hails were answered. And still the carrier held course. The strength of a carrier strike group isn't in reaction. It's an absorption. The ability to take pressure without responding emotionally to let the other side reveal intent first. The Venezuelan ships continued to adjust microcourses, attempting to maintain symmetry as the carrier advanced. But symmetry is fragile. It demands constant correction. And correction creates exposure. Every small turn was recorded. Every speed change noted. Every radar emission analyzed. At 4:23 p.m., one ship drifted slightly ahead of the others, narrowing spacing beyond the planned arc. Another corrected late, creating a minor distortion in the formation. To an untrained eye, it meant nothing. To analysts, it meant friction. The formation was working harder now. Effort was increasing. The pressure of maintaining the maneuver was beginning to show. Above it all, the helicopter maintained its orbit. Quiet, steady, watching. No warnings yet, no escalation, just presence. That presence mattered because it removed uncertainty. It made every movement observable, every decision accountable. In gray zone encounters, ambiguity is leverage, and ambiguity was disappearing fast. Inside the CIC, the captain reviewed the plot. The carrier was minutes from the point where the arc would either dissolve or force the next move. Still no deviation, no change in speed, no change in heading. The message was unmistakable. This ship was not maneuvering around pressure. It was moving through it. By now, the Venezuelan commanders had to see it. They weren't surrounding a vessel reacting in isolation. They were operating inside a layered, interconnected system that did not need to announce itself. The realization came quietly, without words. The next decision by either side would define how this encounter ended. And for the first time since the 8 ships appeared on radar, the advantage was no longer with the ones trying to shape the space. It was with the side that had already mastered it. At 4:29 p.m., the geometry broke. One Venezuelan ship, previously holding its place in the arc, advanced half a knot faster than the others. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't sudden. But on the tactical display, the change was unmistakable. The vessel's track crept forward, narrowing the closest point of approach ahead of the carrier's bow. That shift crossed a line, not a legal one, not a lethal one, but an operational one. Inside the Combat Information Center, the update moved quickly through the chain. Distances recalculated. Time to CPA shortened. The formation that had relied on symmetry now showed strain. The carrier did not slow. It did not turn. It did not signal distress. Instead, the response came from above. The helicopter that had been observing quietly altered its profile, descending slightly and tightening its orbit. The move was deliberate, visible, and impossible to misinterpret. Its sensors locked forward. Electro-optical feeds sharpened. Infrared confirmed engine output and deck activity on the advancing ship. Still no weapons were pointed. Still no warnings had been issued. Then the broadcast went out. Calm, measured, professional. Venezuelan naval vessel, you are conducting unsafe maneuvers in international waters. Alter course immediately. The message was transmitted once, then repeated in Spanish. No raised voices, no threats, just clarity. For several seconds, nothing changed. The Venezuelan ship held speed. Its bow wake remained sharp. On deck, crew movement paused as if awaiting instruction. Cameras captured it all. The moment of indecision framed against open sea. Then slowly the wake softened. Speed dropped by a fraction of a knot. Then another. The vessel's heading shifted just 2 degrees. Barely noticeable to the naked eye, but decisive on the plot. The CPA widened. The immediate pressure eased. That single adjustment triggered a chain reaction. The neighboring ships corrected next, realigning to preserve spacing that no longer served its original purpose. The arc lost its precision. What had been a coordinated front began to unravel into individual decisions. The helicopter maintained its position, steady and unblinking. A non-lethal laser briefly illuminated the water near the lead ship's bridge, an unmistakable marker of attention without aggression. The message had landed. At 4:37 p.m., the formation dissolved. One ship peeled away to the south. Another reduced speed and fell back. 2 others altered course, widening distance from the carrier's path. Within minutes, the 8 ships that had shaped the encounter were no longer shaping anything at all. The carrier continued forward, unchanged from the moment the first contact appeared. Same speed, same heading, same calm wake cutting through the sea. No collision, no warning shots, no escalation, just documentation. Every maneuver, every transmission, every correction was logged, time-stamped, and archived. What began as an attempt to apply pressure ended as a complete record, one that could not be argued later. By 4:45 p.m., the Venezuelan ships were opening distance, their headings no longer coordinated, their formation gone. The horizon returned to what it had been earlier that afternoon. Open water, scattered silhouettes, no immediate friction. On deck, operations never paused. Below deck, the CIC returned to routine. Monitoring, though nothing about what had just happened was routine. The system had worked exactly as designed. Presence applied, boundaries enforced, control maintained. At sea, dominance isn't always announced with force. Sometimes it's demonstrated by who holds course when everyone else has to adjust. That afternoon in the Caribbean, no weapons were fired, but the outcome was decisive. And for those watching closely, the lesson was unmistakable. Restraint, when backed by capability and discipline, is not weakness. It is leverage. By early evening, the Caribbean had returned to its familiar stillness. The Venezuelan warships were now separated by miles of open water, their headings diverging, their formation dissolved into routine navigation. On radar, the contacts faded back into background traffic, tracked, but no longer relevant. The immediate encounter was over. What remained was the record. Inside the carrier strike group, analysts reviewed timelines frame by frame. Radar plots showed every bearing change. Optical feeds captured every deck movement. Audio logs preserved every unanswered hail and every measured warning. Nothing was left to interpretation. Everything was preserved as fact. This is how modern naval encounters are decided, not by explosions, not by headlines in the moment, but by what can be proven afterward. From a tactical perspective, the outcome was clear. The carrier completed its transit without deviation. No weapons were employed. No rules of engagement were violated. Control of space, time, and escalation remained firmly with the U.S. Navy, from first contact to last maneuver. But the larger story extended beyond a single afternoon. The Venezuelan move had followed a familiar pattern. Apply pressure just below the threshold of force, provoke a reaction, and frame the narrative later. It's a strategy designed for cameras and headlines, not for prolonged confrontation. What it encountered instead was something different. A system built to absorb pressure without reacting impulsively. A command structure that favors documentation over drama. A doctrine that treats restraint as a tool, not a limitation. Throughout the encounter, The carrier strike group never needed to demonstrate firepower. That power was understood by everyone involved. What mattered was discipline, the ability to hold course, maintain posture, and let the opposing side reveal intent through its own actions. And intent over time always leaves fingerprints. Every course correction made by the Venezuelan ships narrowed their options. Every unanswered hail reduced ambiguity. Every attempt to preserve formation increased the strain on coordination. When the moment came to decide, the decision had already been shaped by minutes of recorded behavior. In the end, withdrawal wasn't forced by threat. It was compelled by clarity. For naval professionals, the lesson is straightforward. Escalation control is not about doing nothing. It's about doing exactly what's necessary and nothing more. Presence without provocation. Observation without overreaction. Authority without noise. That balance is difficult to maintain. It requires training, trust, and a command climate that values patience as much as power. But when it works, it leaves no room for misunderstanding. As the carrier continued on its course that evening, flight operations resumed at their normal pace. Watches changed, logs were signed. To the crew, the day closed like any other. Another transit, another set of contacts, another reminder of why discipline matters. Yet beyond the horizon, the impact lingered. 8 warships had attempted to shape an encounter through proximity and numbers. One carrier strike group had answered by doing exactly what it was designed to do. Operate lawfully. Remain composed and retain control from start to finish. No shots fired, no collisions, no retreat. Just one side moving forward and the other deciding it was time to move away. So the question remains not for commanders, but for observers. In moments like this, should pressure be met with force or with restraint? Is escalation the clearest signal of strength? Or is strength best shown by refusing to escalate at all? The Caribbean encounter offers its own answer. At sea, the side that controls the narrative is often the side that never needed to raise its voice. And sometimes the most decisive move is simply staying the course.